let's return to a topic that, of course, has been dominating, particularly in the last week with stage 6, of course, for the last year, because we've had our most intense year of load shedding, and 2023 is not looking any better. So, of course, you've heard of load shedding. You probably also know about load reduction, where typically defaulting communities are cut off for a period during peak demand times. But do you know what load curtailment is? Well, Fanele Mondi is the CEO of the Energy Intensive Users Group, which represents the big companies that require a lot of power. Think Anglo American, Glencore. Before being appointed to this position, he was at Eskom for over 2 decades, and he joins us now. Thank you so much for your time. When I saw that you'd worked at Eskom for a very long time, I thought I had to start, before we get into the big energy users, by asking you a little bit more about your thoughts from the outside when you look at the state Eskom is in. Do you think the solutions to fixing the problem are easy, and do you think that the Energy Crisis Committee and all the role players are heading in the right direction to sort things out?
Good afternoon, Sally, and your viewership. Yeah, based on my experience, I mean, to turn around, for instance, EAF is a huge effort. It's not an easy thing, but you would appreciate right now that Eskom has got not only the EAF problem, I think the whole organization has got to be turned around, so to say. So there are many solutions. There is no one single solution that can turn things around. So the efforts which have been brought forward, in my view, there is probably primarily about 4 of those. One is about sorting out the supply side of the electricity industry, which means that we need to build more electricity into the place. But one of the cheapest ways and fastest ways to turn around is actually fixing Eskom plants, which is about maintenance. So there's a whole lot of work that needs to be there. We have a huge asset which is already on the ground, which we just need to get it working. So that is extremely important. The third aspect is really about the demand side. It's where you say, how do we control the way we use electricity? So there, Eskom has done good work in the past. I think if you remember, during the first times we introduced to this load shedding around about 2007, 2010, where there was a huge effort in terms of doing demand side management, and it made a big difference in terms of the constraints we had at the time. We are not seeing much of that this time around, so that's another cheapest way of solving the aspects. The third one is really about, the fourth is, in my view, it's really about the governance in terms of the legislation, the policy, how to run an effective organization, etc., etc. I would say that it's not easy answers, certainly, but more importantly, it's about getting Eskom people engaged in terms of turning that organization around. No matter how much we raise our voices outside, until Eskom people are engaged in terms of turning that organization, nothing is going to happen.
You know, I think you must be the first person who I've interviewed who's kind of spoken about load shedding in positive terms, basically saying that it's actually one way of trying to manage the pressure on the grid. We've seen some of our worst load shedding ever. We know about load reduction, but talk to me a little bit about load curtailment, because that directly affects your intensive energy users.
Maybe, Salif, just before I get there, let me just clarify. Demand-side management is not about load shedding. You know, load shedding is a response when your system is in a tight situation to prevent it from collapsing. So that's when you use load shedding. So it is a corrective measure, not a good practice to do. Demand-side management is really about how we use electricity. Do we waste electricity? And yes, in some aspects we do. You go to major cities, you see buildings right in the middle of the night with security lights on, which is certainly understandable. But you also see offices when there is absolutely nobody inside, all switched on. So those are the kind of things where we actually waste electricity for no purpose. So that's what demand side management, not the issues of load shedding. Load shedding, coming back to your question, goes with what we call load curtailment. These are controlled by the standard, which NERSA, the regulator, owns, basically. It's that standard effectively has got two aspects. One is the load shedding. Load shedding by nature, it's a rotational a blackout where, one area to the next, but the amount is specified. If it's stage 1, we know it's 1,000. If it's stage 2, it's 2,000, but it will rotate right across. But with load curtailment, it's slightly different. Where there we do not have rotation. All heavy industry customers who are on load curtailment program, they are supposed to reduce at the same time, all of them. That's what the standard requires. So there we have 4 stages effectively. One is what we call stage 1. It means the industry stage 1 and 2 are normally combined, where industries are expected to reduce 10% of their production or electricity consumption. Stage 3, 15% is expected to be reduced. Stage 4, 20% of production is expected to be reduced. And then it doesn't run like the normal load shedding standard, where it's normally 2 hours in other areas, others is 3 hours at a time. There is declared for a full period. That period can be 8 hours, it could be 2 days, wherever or for however long the system operator deemed necessary. So that's where the difference is where you have to take that down. Beyond that stage, then we go.
Sorry, I'm just worried about time. So I'm understanding now that load curtailment is these big companies who require a lot of power, just downing the power system for a while, just to take the pressure off the grid. But as you're explaining, it's longer chunks of time. Talk to me about how much load curtailment is ongoing at the moment. Have these companies been involved in the load curtailment, or is it fairly new that they've started having to be involved in this?
No, it's been happening for quite a while. The most recent one was last week, where the companies were taken to load curtailment. It is part of the standard when the load shedding was introduced. There are basically 2 reasons, really. One is about human safety. It's not easy to switch on and off these plants without exposing people to danger. As you would appreciate, other people are 5 kilometers, underground, but it's also about the equipment. Some of this equipment, you cannot just switch it on and off. It's heavy equipment, which takes time to switch on and off.
All right, that makes sense. I want to move to solutions, because you've also been engaging very much in that. While the big companies that you represent are energy users, they're also looking at creating their own energy solutions. And one of the issues that you feel should be pushed more, and it's interesting because I had a discussion with Chris Yelland who said a very similar thing, and that is that if government could put more emphasis on buying back power, incentivizing people to be more involved in solar, from your big companies to the individual households. You believe that should be pushed? Tell me more about that.
Yes, I think there's basically 2 aspects to it. The first aspect is really, where you already have this generation by the private sector. Luckily, Eskom is currently, as we speak, embarking on that process. It's what they call a standard offer, where they have gone out to the industry, say, if you've got any excess capacity you can sell, please, let's contract, and then we'll pay you for that power. And then they've got also what is called emergency power. It's where they say, when we have emergency, can we use you only for that emergency? So that is on the plans already. Like I'm saying that the RFP was issued last year already. So I think they're busy trying to collect information and contract. But the second aspect of the power buyback is where industry or users may be asked not to use Eskom electricity on certain terms, where we say that, okay, you are not going to use some of your electricity now, we'll compensate to you for that purpose. So that's the second aspect of the power buyback. And that particular aspect falls under what we call demand-side management responses. It becomes a demand-side response.
All right. So what we're seeing is, everyone has to play their part and everyone has to be involved. But you would like to see quicker rollout, I understand, of alternative power across the board, whether it's the big companies investing in it, and I know that there are plans for more and more big companies to do that, right down to the roofs above our own heads in our homes. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. That, of course, is Fanele Mondi. He's the CEO of the Energy Intensive Users Group.